Hello. Um, One of the questions that I get quite a lot is how to practice saxophone effectively, and yeah, how can I make the most of my practice time? And I think it's a little bit like the gym. Have you ever been to a gym and you've seen people? Some people wonder. I've been this person, so I'm not criticising, but have you seen people that go into the gym? They do a bit of this over here, and they do a couple of bits of that, and they look at that piece of equipment. They walk on it for 10 minutes, and you can kind of tell that their strategy is very, very loose. And although it's brilliant to be there, they're probably not getting as much out of it as the person that turns up with a book, and they've got a book because they've made a note of the things that they did last times because they don't want to do the same thing, and they're really, really organized. So we can kind of do the same thing with the sax. And what I've done is, although I can find it now, is a good question, is I have created a sheet which I will share with you now. So this is the way that I'm thinking is a good way to practice the sax. And really, fundamentally, what you're going to do is to divide your time into thirds. Now, I think the beauty of dividing your time into thirds is that it doesn't really matter whether you have 10 minutes or half an hour to practice. But if you divide it like this, then you know that you're covering all of the bases. And one of the things that I think definitely I would practice every time I pick up the sax is scales. It really doesn't matter where you are in your journey, this fabulous journey on the saxophone. If you're still going to have to practice scales, and even if you know all of your scales, you still need to keep on top of them. And I can tell you that the greatest sax players in the world still practice their major scales, because the major scales and the minor scales are the keys to the kingdom, and they are the fundamental foundation that everything else is built upon. And if you have that, you're going to be okay, and if you don't have that, not so much. So the first thing that I would practice is your scales. And there's a whole bunch of options that you could do around that. You could practice your major scales. If you're not comfortable with the major scales, then definitely go through those. Work on the ones that you don't know. That's the secret, because what we tend to do is to practice things that we do know. Dorian Minors is another really strong thing to practice that's going to stand you in lots of really very, very good stead. Dominant seventh scales or Mixolydian scales, which is the fifth mode of a major scale. If you're not sure about that, feel free to ask me, but that's another one that you really want to have down. Aeolian minors, which is the relative minor. This is the sixth mode of the major scale. Harmonic minors, fantastic snake charmer sound, people tend to call it. This lovely Eastern quality. Can you do that in different keys? Lots of different keys. Can you do it in all 12 keys? Blue scales, fantastically useful for a sax player to have, especially if you want to jam with a band, or if you're gigging. These blue scales are absolutely invaluable. And the scale that I could have put on there, which is a minor pentatonic, very, very similar to that. Also, the chord tones of all of the above, the root, the third, the fifth, the seventh, the ninth, all really, really worth practicing. In terms of improvisation, those are the notes that you're going to be hitting all of the time. And then scale patterns and diminished scales. So scale patterns like thirds or fourths are two really, really good ones. Triads is another really strong one that you can, very practical things that, again, that you can use in improvisation, or that will just really get you good at moving around on your instrument, give you dexterity. And diminished scales is another one that you can have. So you can do one of these. You can just pick one and just work on those. So if you only have half an hour, 10 minutes, I'm going to practice my Dorian Minors. Which ones don't I know? Which ones don't I feel comfortable with? Then the next third is going to be around tunes, because at the end of the day, it gets dark. No, at the end of the day, the point of playing the saxophone is to be able to play beautiful songs on your saxophone. So why wouldn't you practice that? How many tunes do you know? How many tunes in your repertoire? If your friend came round to your house and said, "Wow, I didn't know you played the sax," what are they going to say? Play me A major, would you? No, they're not. They're going to say, play me a tune. Do you know a whole tune? Do you know a tune from the start all the way through to the end? Do you know the whole thing? Do you know it by heart? Do you know it by ear? Or are you reading it off a page? Whatever your answer is absolutely fine, but just take stock and see where you're at. Work on it. You could work on a melody that you already know and strengthen it up. you could think about learning a new tune and adding that to your repertoire. You could have a look at the chord charts of tunes, which is the harmonic structure that underlines the melody, or work on tricky sections. Is there any part of a tune which is kind of holding you back from playing the whole thing? Often if you can't play a tune, it's not that you can't play the whole thing, it's just some little tricky section, so maybe you could work on that. And then personally, I really love improvising on the saxophone, so I would definitely work on improvisation. So one of the things that you could work on are any standard licks or patterns that you might have. So major scale licks, minor scale licks. Again, if you're not sure about these, ask me. I'll be more than happy to show you some licks or patterns that you can use for improvisation. Can you jam on, well, I've put jamming on A major, but I don't mean like A major as in the scale, but can you jam on a major scale? Can you jam on a minor scale? Can you jam on a dominant seventh scale? These things, these three types of scales are going to be very, very useful if you can make some nice, intelligent, you know, funky kind of sounds on these three different chord types. Can you improvise over a chord chart? I mean, for me, this was like such a massive thing that, you know, years ago, about 15 years ago when I started looking at chord charts, I just thought, oh, it's just no way I'm going to be able to understand this. So intimidating. But now, absolutely love it. And it doesn't take that long to get the hang of understanding a chord chart. How good are you at going through a chord chart and playing a nice solo? And just having fun, just have some fun. And then to finish, make sure you finish on a high note. And I don't mean like literally a high note, an F sharp. I just mean finish on, do something that you love. Whatever that might be. Might be a scale, might be a tune, might be a lick, might be a pattern, might be, I don't know, jamming on something. But whatever it is, save what you love doing till the very last thing, because then when you think about practicing again, your brain will always go to the last thing that you did. What was the last thing that I did on the saxophone? And it will be something really, really positive. So always finish on a high. If you've got any questions about any of these things, or if you'd like a copy of this sheet, then please feel free to ask me. I'd be more than happy to share it with you. And if you have any questions about anything that we've talked about today, just let me know. Take care. Cheers.